This is the experiment to show during respiration we release carbon dioxide. In the first test tube, when we pump the pitchkari, there is no change in color with the lime water. But in the second experiment, when we blow the air into the test tube, the lime water color turns into milky white. That means we release carbon dioxide during respiration. This is human respiratory system. You're seeing the diagram where the respiratory starts from the nasal passage from the nose. Then it enters into nasal cavity, then enters into pharynx, larynx and trachea. You're seeing the trachea where we find C-shaped rings made up of cartilage bones. The air passes through the trachea and then enters into bronchi. So, in the bronchi, you find small branches known as bronchioles, and these bronchioles ends with a small balloon-like structures called alveoli. The alveoli provide a surface where the exchange of gases can take place. During the breathing cycle, when the air is taken in and let it out, the lungs always contain a residual volume of air so that there is sufficient time for oxygen to be absorbed and for the carbon dioxide to be released. So, alveoli are the air sacs where actually the exchange of gases takes place. Now, let me see what is respiration and what is the difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Respiration is a process where the breaking of glucose in presence of oxygen to release carbon dioxide and water only in presence of oxygen. Sometimes in absence of oxygen, it may form ethanol and lactic acid, that is in absence of oxygen. Let me know detail about this. So in the previous class we studied about animal nutrition, that too particularly in human being alimentary canal system. Now how in the alimentary canal the food what we intaken that completely undergo digestion and finally it converts into smallest particle called glucose, and that glucose will be broken down by the process called respiration. Now there are two types of respiration: aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. I written code P means in presence of oxygen. The breakdown of glucose in presence of oxygen is known as aerobic respiration. I written A, that is anaerobic. So that means in absence of oxygen, the glucose breaks down in absence of oxygen is known as anaerobic respiration. So anyhow, so when the glucose breaks down, it converts into pyruvate. Now the glucose converting into pyruvate, it takes place in a cell. Where actually it takes place? It takes place in cytoplasm. So the glucose converts into pyruvate in the cytoplasm, the first step. And the next one is, so that again the pyruvate, again it should broken down into water, carbon dioxide or lactic acid or ethanol into some other form. But there the pyruvate again enters into mitochondria. The pyruvate enters into mitochondria and then it broken down to release as carbon dioxide and water. So now let me see how the glucose undergo division or how it broken down. Now glucose, it is a 6 carbon molecule. In the cytoplasm, it converts into 3 carbon compound called pyruvate. And again pyruvate enters into mitochondria in presence of oxygen, that is aerobic respiration. In presence of oxygen, it converts into carbon dioxide, water with enormous of energy. Next, when the pyruvate doesn't obtain any oxygen content, then it undergo anaerobic. I said already, in absence of oxygen, if it is there is no availability of oxygen, then it undergo anaerobic respiration. So I written minus. In the absence of oxygen, the pyruvate converts into lactic acid and energy. Where this happens, I said this is in mitochondria, okay, and where actually this lactic acid is formed in the muscle cells. It forms in the muscle cells, okay. Again, glucose converts into pyruvate. If there is no availability of oxygen, then it undergo anaerobic respiration. It results in the formation of ethanol with the release of carbon dioxide and less amount of energy. When you compare here aerobic respiration, the release of energy is more, and in the anaerobic respiration, the energy is very less. The product formed is two carbon compound called ethanol. Where actually this takes place, it takes place in certain microorganisms where there is no availability of oxygen. Example, in yeast. In the yeast, the glucose converts into pyruvate, pyruvate converts into ethanol. This happens in the yeast cells. Glucose converts into pyruvate, pyruvate converts into lactic acid in the muscle cells. Glucose converts into pyruvate, pyruvate converts into carbon dioxide and water in aerobic respiration. Only in the aerobic respiration where we can obtain more amount of energy. So this is how the aerobic and anaerobic respiration takes place. So next, let me see how the respiration takes place in the lungs.